This is Fantasy Football Today from CBSSports.com.
Okay, it's Fantasy Week 10, and it's time for us to tell you who to start and who to sit. A quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver, and a tight end. I'm Adam Azer, Jamie Eisenberg, Dave Richard. This is a special presentation of Fantasy Football Today for CBS Local Sports. What's up, everyone? Let's do it, Jamie. We got a quarterback to start. It's Colin Kaepernick against Carolina.
You said start, right?
Yeah, I said
Even though the matchup's terrible.
That's what I said.
Even though Carolina's been fantastic.
Hey, you're the one who's telling me to start him.
We're starting him.
Okay.
Here's why. Colin Kaepernick's going to have a great game this week, and I think you got to look at the last two times he had time to prepare for an opponent. 3 times, actually, if you go to the season opener against Green Bay this year. But the 2 playoff games last year, going into against the Packers, in the first playoff matchup, he was awesome. In the Super Bowl, he was awesome. And now you have time for him to prepare against a Panthers defense that hasn't allowed a quarterback to get 20 fantasy points this year. It's going to happen this week. Colin Kaepernick's going to come off their bye week. He's going to play very well at home. And it's very similar. My friend Dave Richard illustrated this on one of our Fantasy Football Today shows. Very similar to Tom Brady, struggling a little bit, facing a tough match against the Pittsburgh Steelers, playing at home in a game that they needed to win. Colin Kaepernick's going to lead the 49ers to a victory, playing very well this week.
He's actually my friend, Dave Richard, Jamie. We just kind of let you participate sometimes.
Thank you.
Dave, a quarterback to sit. We have very low projections for Matt Ryan this week.
I'm friends with everybody, first of all, but I'm not going to be friends with Matt Ryan after what I have to say here, because I think Matt Ryan is somebody that fantasy owners need to stay away from. I think that the numbers aren't going to be good for him. The matchup against Seattle, that's a good defense. They haven't played well on the road, and certainly last week they struggled against Tampa Bay. But I can't help but think that Matt Ryan, without Roddy White, we know Julio Jones is long gone. The offensive line's a problem. I think the Seahawks are going to be able to take away the tight end there, and we're going to see Matt Ryan struggle for another game. I don't want to start him. I can find another option. There's Nick Foles. Whoever starts for the Bears, whether it's Josh McCown or Jay Cutler, that's a guy that you want to go with this week. I saw a Case Keenum in Houston going up against Arizona. I like him better than Matt Ryan this week, too. I think Matt Ryan stinks.
But you do like Maurice JonesDrew as we transition to running backs here, and we talk about MJD as a start this week.
I look at this matchup against Tennessee, and I look at the production that Tennessee's given up. I wrote it down before we came on the air. Zach Stacy, 29 fantasy points last week. Frank Gore, 22 points against Tennessee the last time they played before that. Marshawn Lynch, this is the previous game, 26 fantasy points. Jamal Charles, 19 fantasy points. Those are all great running backs. I'd be thrilled if MJD had half that type of production. And he's going to get those opportunities. He's had at least 8 fantasy points 3 of his last 4 games. The Titans have allowed multiple rushing touchdowns in each of their last 3 games to running backs. So I think this is open wide for MJD to have a good game against the Titans, especially with Jacksonville's offense now down Justin Blackmon. They need MJD more than ever.
Ben Tate, how do you feel about him this week, Jamie?
I'm a little bit nervous. You know, he played okay stepping in for Aaron Foster last week, got you 8 fantasy points. I think that's kind of where he's going to be this week because Arizona's run defense has actually been fantastic. You're talking about a situation with the Cardinals. They've only allowed 2 running backs to get double digits in fantasy points against them. That was Frank Gore and Marshawn Lynch. And Ben Tate says right now with the broken ribs, it's hard for him to breathe and laugh. Well, we don't necessarily need you laughing on the field, but we do need you to breathe okay. So I think Ben Tate's an okay flex option. I think he'll be in that 7 to 9 fantasy point range. So good week for running backs. You could actually consider him outside the top 24. But if you need him, if you're the Foster owner, you could be okay to start him. But it's a tough matchup because the Cardinals have done a good job.
Okay, a couple of wide receivers, one to start and one to sit. And Dave, Riley Cooper coming off a huge game at Oakland. Now he's at Green Bay. Nick Foles, red hot. And we like Riley Cooper this week.
Yeah, and I'm buying into the connection between Cooper and Foles. And you should, too. Go back and look at how Riley Cooper's done with Nick Foles under center. He's been great. The catches are there. The yardage has definitely been there. The touchdowns have definitely been there. And look at his games where Mike Vick is in there or Matt Barkley. 2 catches or less every single time.
Wow.
So I think Foles is going to continue to target Cooper. Matchup last week for Green Bay's defense, they struggled with wide receivers. Josh McCown did a great job throwing to Brandon Marshall, throwing to Alshon Jeffrey. And I think the way that Green Bay offense is right now, it might mean that they're going to turn the ball over a few more times than normal. And we could see Philadelphia start to put some more points on the board just as they did last week. So I like Riley Cooper a lot.
Mike Wallace is a sit Monday night at Tampa Bay.
Yeah, you know, the Bucs finally figured out that Darrelle Reeves can cover people. So the last 2 games, he's been doing a good job on Steve Smith and then Golden Tate. Both those guys had minimal production. And look, Mike Wallace obviously hasn't delivered to the type of fantasy value that you expected from him. So he's at best a 3rd receiver. He hasn't been scoring touchdowns. I don't think you're going to see him get in the end zone this week. This is actually a week where I think Lamar Miller can actually lead the Dolphins to a victory if they do win this game against Tampa Bay. So I'm a little bit nervous about Mike Wallace. Like we said about running backs, good week for wide receivers as well. Not a lot of teams off on bye this week. So I think you're looking at Mike Wallace as really more of a number 3 receiver at best.
Okay, Dave, same game, Monday night again, and we'll talk about a tight end here, Timothy Wright, who we're calling a start. He's been good lately. The Dolphins have been better against tight ends. What do you expect from Wright?
5 out of 8 games this year, they've allowed a tight end to get to double-digit fantasy points. And I think that that's something that speaks to a possible matchup that favors Wright. But I also like Wright long-term. I think this is a guy you can pick up off waivers and just stash on your bench. He might be the next Jordan Reed. He's kind of in that mold of athlete turned tight end who's not really a tight end. He's not really a blocking type. He's a receiver who just happens to be listed as a tight end. I like him this week against Miami because of the matchup. I like him long-term because of his potential to be the number 2 receiver in the Tampa Bay offense.
And the Steelers are hosting Buffalo, but Heath Miller is a sit. In fact, on Fantasy Football Today this week, we said you could drop Heath Miller to pick up Timothy Wright, but if you have him, you got to sit him.
Yeah, I just don't like the matchup for him. You've seen Buffalo, for the most part this season, do a good job in defending tight ends, and we've seen Heath Miller disappear a little bit from the Steelers' offense over the last couple of weeks because of the emergence of Emmanuel Sanders, because of Le'Veon Bell and the work that he's done out of the backfield. And so Miller is not a top 12 tight end for me this week. I think he's going to struggle a little bit. Buffalo has allowed a couple touchdowns to tight ends in the last 3 weeks, but I think Heath Miller is so dependent on not only scoring touchdowns, but being in that 50 to 70-yard range as well. So where he got off to a good start when he came back from the ACL injury, he's tailed off a little bit, and I think that's because Ben Roethlisberger looking to his receivers a little bit more. So I just don't like Heath Miller this week. I would much rather start Timothy Wright.
For more projections and rankings, check fantasynews.cbssports.com. Make sure you watch our live show Tuesday through Friday, noon Eastern, and Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Dave, Jamie, Chad Johnson, and Jason Horowitz have a special edition of Fantasy Football Today. This has been a special edition for CBS Local Sports. I'm Adam Azer, and we'll talk to you next week. Good luck in Week 10.